Before we begin, Joe, can you scroll that up? I don't have my agenda. I just ran in from another meeting. Thank you. Perfect. Before we begin, we acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional and unceded territory of the Lummi, Nooksack, Samish, and Semiahmoo people who have cared for and tended this land since time immemorial. Truth and acknowledgement are critical to building mutual respect and connection across all barriers of heritage and difference. We begin this effort to acknowledge what has been buried by honoring the truth. We pay respect to their elders, past and present. Please take a moment to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that bring us together here today. And please join us in uncovering such truths at any and all public events. So again, we'll call that this meeting to order. And Jill, could you put that back up one more time? So new member recruiting is our first topic. Any thoughts on that? We talked a little bit about it last time. We got a couple things we want to accomplish in new members and plus our leadership issue we have for next year. So any ideas?
So
Rayleigh?
Barry, I'm going to throw a little bit of a monkey wrench into this. I was going to wait till other business, but I think it's applicable to new meeting or new member and recruiting. So on November 3rd of this month or this year, I will be leaving the city of Blaine.
Wow.
Oh,
Potentially, which means my representation of the small cities from the DMCMA and the small cities with the courts here will have to be ending. However, so long as everything goes through at county council, I have accepted the offer of county clerk for Whatcom County Superior Court starting November 6th.
Congratulations.
yeah.
Wow,
Congratulations.
that's
Rayleigh.
wonderful.
Thank you. So my role will be shifting. I have some new things to be learning. I'm guessing you'll still be seeing my face throughout meetings. I think there's some spots that Dave Reynolds left that I will be filling, but I'm going to have a little bit of a learning curve. So the role for the chair for the Legal and Justice Committee, I may need to step back for a bit as I'm learning what my new roles and responsibilities are. Does not mean that I will leave you guys without anybody for a little bit, but I want to try to make a smooth transition and know what I'm doing before I take on more than I need to. So that being said, we still need to move forward with adding more people. And so I'm happy to try to help in any way that you need, whether it's recruiting somebody new or if somebody else is interested in stepping up as the chair for the Legal and Justice Subcommittee along with Arlene. I think that's something we also need to add on to this conversation.
Thanks, Raylene. And again, congratulations. Arlene.
Can Raylene, can you still be the chair? You can't still be the chair of the.
You know, I may be able to. I'm not saying that I can't do it. I don't know what all my responsibilities are going to be quite yet. And Dave and I are going to meet on the 2nd, and we've been communicating back and forth. I know there's other committees that I'm going to have to step into. And so I don't want to say that I can continue on as the chair, not knowing what all my other obligations are going to be in the new role. So I just want to put that out there. I mean, I'll be talking to the county and trying to see where I'm supposed to be and what my priorities are there first. before I say, yes, I'm gonna continue on all of this. So I may need some assistance. And knowing Arlene is still, trying to work through her own items at this time, I think she's gonna need some help too. So I'll talk to Dave as we go on, and maybe I'll be able to continue as chair. But I don't know that quite yet, and I don't want you guys to just be surprised if I end up having to step back for a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Arlene.
How long is my service? Stephen, do you know?
Jill might be able to answer that.
Hi, Arlene. Your
Yeah.
first term expires in January and
Oh,
you
in
are
January.
eligible to reapply. So if you want to continue with the task force, then you would reapply. Oh, probably
Okay,
in December, but
thank
yeah,
you.
you're good.
Just curious. Yeah, thank
So
you.
Stephen, I think one person that we've talked about was Peter Frazier, as far as getting him on board. You've talked to him, right?
I've talked to him. I think Maya talked to him also. And I think he would be an excellent member. I've heard some discussion about him as the chair. I think it would be challenging for a newcomer, even someone who's been in these issues as Peter has, to come in and be a chair because of the multiple kinds of roles that would have. But I don't know that we have a lot of candidates for chair or co-chair.
Right. Dan.
Are we trying to fill? I'm sorry, I've got my camera off. I've got a pretty bad reception. Are we trying to fill leadership first, or are we trying to fill the kind of rank and file, or what's the order of operations here?
Jill, what's your thinking? What's your preference on how we approach this?
I don't have a preference, but I do think they're two separate conversations.
They are, yeah.
So recruiting in general, new voices onto the task force is an important topic to me. Just because I would love to have it filled, right? And then that will increase the pool in terms of leadership.
What are we looking at for numbers? How many new members do we need to recruit to get
So we'll need to approach the Small Cities Caucus. I don't think it's called that anymore, but whatever its current name, to get them to appoint a new small cities representative. In terms of terms expiring, of course, Jack and Stephen's second terms are both expiring. Greg Winter's term is also expiring, second term, and he won't be eligible to reapply. And let's see, Arlene, your first full term. So 1 citizen, 1 consumer, and 2 social and health services positions.
But Jill, when is my time up?
On the committee, your first term ends January 31st. So all terms expire January 31st.
Okay.
Yeah.
well, as far as Greg's spot, Mike, you would certainly, I would think, be the natural to apply for that.
Yeah, I was going to, there was an opening last time and it seemed really valuable to leave that space for Jason McGill. And I'm so glad that he joined. And I know he's got his hands in a lot of different fires. I was going to offer to talk with Greg at Opportunity Council to see if and Jill, if I'm not mistaken, Greg was occupying a slot for social and health or social and human services. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah. So obviously, we want to make space for other organizations if they want to be there. But on the other hand, this is near and dear to Opportunity Council's heart. So if you all agree, I'd like to have a conversation with my boss, Greg, and see who we might offer, whether that be me or another person at Opportunity Council, if that sounds good to you guys. Yeah, okay, great. I'll do that. And then Barry, report back to Jill, right?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Raylene,
So I did talk to Michael Herman, who's the city manager here with the Blaine, and let him know that the Small Cities Caucus was going to have to appoint somebody new for my position if everything works out the way it's supposed to. And just thinking off the top of my head, John Vanderyacht is a sergeant with the Ferndale Police Department, and I believe when I started, think it was Knapp's position, Chief Knapp, that I actually filled in, and then Chief Taylor was on there, and I think Tanksley took a position there to kind of fill Taylor's position when things got reorganized there, but I think he stepped down, and I think Sergeant Vanderyacht might be a good position for somebody that's actually got feet on the ground. And I believe the city of Ferndale is currently fully staffed at this time for the police department, so they might have an availability to help in that position. And I'm trying to remember her full name, but I think it's Alexander. She's with the city of Bellingham Police Department records. That wouldn't be a Small Cities member, but I think she would be a valuable asset, like for the index committee. Just throwing some different names out there of people that I think might be able to assist. Anyways.
I'll just point out, this is probably our most sizable opportunity to advance the diversity composition of the task force. And so I would put that up near the top of the criteria we're looking for in potential candidates.
And Chief Tanksley just corrected me. It's actually no longer Sergeant Vanderyacht, it's Lieutenant Vanderyacht.
Jill?
Yeah, and I just wanted to let you all know that Pyramid is going to be doing some recruiting content, I think next month, to get the word out to the broader community about the vacancies. So that's going to be happening as well.
Jill, is there a deadline for applying for the vacancies?
Deadline is January 2nd, I believe. Yes.
And when will you post that?
End of November.
End of November? Raylene, is that a current hand?
Are there job descriptions or criteria or something? And I'm sorry to be ignorant about this, but what is the deciding body?
The county council, right? It's
Yeah,
as far as
it's an
general-
appointment.
Yeah. Anything else on this topic?
Just to answer Maya's question right quick, they need to be residents of Whatcom County and registered voters of Whatcom County, and then meet the criteria of the position.
And Jill, for the process, does that come as a recommendation from the executive and then the county council appoints them? Is that the way that order works, or?
No, this is a direct appoint by the council.
Direct appoint by the council. Great, thank you.
Yep.
Other thoughts? Okay. Jill, what's next on our agenda?
So next is a pyramid update, and I am going to screen share right quick. Pyramid is working on Facebook and Instagram carousel based on the sequential intercept model. We discussed this at our last check-in with Pyramid, and it was just them and Jack, and they're building this draft content, and they were looking for feedback about important programs to list here under each intercept. So I wanted to give you guys an opportunity to put eyes on this and provide any suggestions if you have anything, and I can scroll down when you're ready.
Perry,
Excuse me, Jill, in Intercept 0, community medicated assisted treatment, the language is really shifted to medications for opioid use disorder, MOUD, instead of MAT. Just wanted to pass that along. It really means the same thing, but it's more appropriate. How do I say
Got
that?
it.
Okay.
Medication,
it's down
For
here
op-
under Intercept 3, I see.
okay,
We really use medications plural for opioid use disorder as a newer terminology.
got it. Thank you.
Mike?
Yeah, this question is kind of for Perry. It's in response to Jill's request for feedback about which programs to list. Obviously, they should be kind of top ones, right? Because we're kind of limiting it to be able to keep focus. And Perry, I guess my brain goes back to the behavioral health gap analysis group, which used a pretty extensive process to triage. Does this kind of meet that, or does it match that in your perception? Jill, do you know, were they given that information? That seems to be a really valuable source of, kind of finely honed wish list of items, kind of prioritized by importance and or effectiveness.
Yes, in fact, they were working off that intercept that the BGAT created. They Pyramid had a copy of that as they were building this. One of the discussions that we had at our last check-in is Pyramid has done so much content building around LEAD and GRACE and those top tier programs, the Deacon Center, and we were thinking this might be an opportunity to also highlight some things that aren't mentioned as often. So we wanted to add a little a few more things beyond just the top tier programs. But if that's not something that's appropriate, then I'm happy to pass that along to them.
No, I mean, as a quick blush, all those things are great, and I think that makes sense. And that's why I appreciate somebody looking overall at the campaign and see what have we brought to the public before, what haven't we? But it's really important. So thank you for letting me know that that's informed by that. That would be one of the key things, rather than me just popping off and giving you, some ideas. I did have one question or observation. I see a lot of focus on youth programs, which are of course very valuable, but in terms of size and scope and number, they don't tend to be the largest. Could you shed a little light on what the thinking is there? Is that kind of what you mentioned, that, alternatively, because we've talked about GRACE, which normally serves mostly adults, is this kind of a way to be able to spotlight some of that kind of early intervention? Could you comment on that, Jill, or is there any conversation about that?
Yes, I can comment a little bit, and you're right on. It's an opportunity to spotlight some other things, but the intervention, or excuse me, the youth focus was brought up by Jack Hovenier, and that's something that he really pushed for in our check-in meeting with Pyramid. That was something that was really important to him.
Well, I applaud that. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think for the public too, that is thinking about prevention. I think we always think about, kids and youth right before they get involved. So that's great. Thank you.
You're welcome. And yeah, Pyramid, Emily and Sakara were incredibly receptive to Jack's suggestion to add a little focus to the youth component there as well.
One
Perry?
last thing, and I'm sorry to dominate, but
Sure.
on Intercept 4 reentry, that looks a little scant.
Yeah.
And I could definitely think of some things. Is it all right to send this out to us if that's not already? And can we comment, just in written to you later?
I would say, yes, I can absolutely send it out to everyone. Comments are probably needed pretty quick because we want to get this finalized and run past legal counsel and get it out there. But yeah, I will make a note to send to everyone. If you guys can get comments to me by the end of the day, that would be great.
Okay. And Jill, when you send that out, would you mind just including that comments by end of the day? That'll help flag it, and I'll be sure
Sure.
to do that.
Sure. And Perry, go ahead.
Oops, I think I had my hand up from before, but I wanted to offer up, this isn't on our SIM, but do we also want to include the 23-hour crisis relief center It's obviously a recent development in comparison to when we did complete the sim, but I'm not sure if it fits. So I just offer that.
Stephen?
That's the one that's being developed now, yes?
We received legislative funds of $9 million for capital.
Right.
And yes, the executive's office is working on development of the building and also providers. Again, I just was looking kind of like where Mike was coming from. Are there some components that we want to add?
Yeah, I think I would love to do something on that new center. It's not open right now and available, and I'm wondering if we can do a separate piece on the county's plans for that. I don't know what any of the county's plans are, so would need some guidance from Paul and Tyler and you, Perry, on some appropriate content to put out to the public about it. But I think that's a great idea.
Okay, yeah, Kayla can probably help. She's been involved in this quite a bit. So
okay, I'll reach out to her and get her feedback. Stephen.
Thanks, Jill. Sorry I wasn't at the meeting yesterday or last week or whenever it was. On Intercept Zero, I wish I'd had a chance to chat with Jack a little bit more. I guess I'm seeing the pyramid contract as touting the work of the task force. And aside from the MAT, MOUD there in Intercept Zero, none of these have any real connection with the task force. They've not been things that we've worked on or promoted, or other than Moonwater being a member of the task force at one point. But I don't see those as being something that we should be bragging about for the task force. And there are things that I think we have had a closer connection with and have more, going back to Mike's point, more impact on Intercept Zero kinds of diversions like the hot team or something like that. So that's my personal reaction to looking at that. I'm also a little bit unclear, with your point about the 23-hour center not yet being in operation. Aside from the Vera assessment that we heard about this week, on Intercept 3 listing increased warrant quash opportunities, unless Eric wants to make a commitment to doing that, we're just talking about a possibility that's been recommended, but not anything that we're likely to see take place. So the timing of that seems as awkward as the 23-hour center. And lastly, I'll just say, and this raises that timing and in operation or in planning stages question as well. In Intercept 4, we have had Brian Estes from NAMI talk about the clubhouse model that's being developed and that John Kraus from Pretrial Services went over to manage. I don't think that's in operation quite yet, but I think they're shooting for sometime soon, and that might be a reentry resource. So I don't know how we sort out these. They're sort of in the pipeline, but they're not actually on the street yet, and how much importance and how close a link to the task force's work these entries ought to have if we're going to publicize them the way we are.
Thank you, Stephen. Just to provide a little bit of context, and I apologize I didn't do this first, that I've scrolled up here to this copy. This is going to be the header description copy for these carousel images below. So it's a direct reference to the task force. And then, let's see, task force makes recommendations on programs at 6 points of intercept, for example. So these programs down below listed in the carousel images are examples of programs at each reentry point, but there is the introduction to the IPRTF here as well. I don't know if that, Dan, Stephen, if that alleviates your concern at all.
Not really, because I don't think, I mean, they are along the 6 points of intercept, but we haven't made any recommendations from that sentence. And also the first sentence says we worked since 2015 to increase resources. We haven't done that with any of those that I'm aware of. So I think they're valuable. I think they are preventive. They probably have some effect, not particularly data driven that I'm aware of on reducing incarceration, but they're sort of not within the task force orbit, was my point.
Okay. So you feel it's more appropriate to remove anything that has not been before the task force, yeah? You're muted, Steve.
I'm sorry. I'm just saying that was my first reaction to that is all of these are pretty small and pretty distant from task force work, and the contract is to tout the accomplishments of the task force. I think that sort of makes us vulnerable to overselling perhaps some of our Intercept Zero stuff. And I'm not saying that I would object to that if other people feel otherwise. I'm just giving my reaction to that.
All right, Dan?
Yeah, Stephen, I hear you in terms of not over touting our accomplishments, but I do want to talk about, I want to talk this through just a little bit when it comes to a number of these intercepts. So Intercept Zero, one of the things that a group of us within the task force really focused on was upstream prevention ideas and programs and such. And we embarked on this program or on this mission, I guess, to work on very early upstream diversion programs. And one of the results of that was the Prop 5 that passed last year by about 20 votes. And that was, there's a very crooked line between the work that the task force does and the outcome of that election. But there was definitely a line there. And several of us were a part of that, including Heather Flaherty, who is one of the leaders of that. I don't know if it lands on this. I don't know how we're trying to organize our thinking when it comes to, what are we taking credit for things, or are we drawing connections between the work of the task force and the work of the broader community? I think that we have to kind of suss those things out. So there's that piece. And then under Intercept 1, that last bullet point about behavioral health trained law enforcement, that needs to be that has to be corrected. So Bellingham does not have BHO officers right now. I just talked to the police chief this morning. We're still down 7 officers. We do not have BHO officers. However, the sheriff's office does have behavioral health trained deputies, and they have a co-responder program. So I would want that to be more delineated and defined under Intercept 1. And then under Intercept 4, I think that we need to talk about housing options for folks that are reentering from the jail. And if they're houseless, we have opportunities in some housing. For example, Sandwich Commons has 13 homeless upon entry units, and I think they're filling up right now. But there are other housing facilities that have very similar amounts of homeless upon entry. So I think that we need to somehow talk about, what happens when people are reentering society from the jail, and what are their options. And my final question would be, how are we communicating this, or what is Pyramid's plan to communicate this out to the community? I know that probably social media outlets and such, but I want to understand what that looks like. And Stephen, I really do, I do hear you. I don't want to take credit for things that we haven't done. It's not fair. But I also want to make sure that we are taking credit for starting conversations and continuing conversations and making things happen. So I just want to put that on the table. Thanks.
Quick response. I completely agree, Dan, that you raised a really good point about what degree of connection are we actually looking for here, and it's not clear, and we ought to make it clear. I also want to add and credit you in Intercept Zero. The school district programs are something you've actively brought into the behavioral health committee, both in terms of membership and discussion and investigation. So I think that should definitely stay there. I would not call it school district programs, which school district makes it sound Bellingham centric again, and it hasn't been in Dan's and Mike's committee. So maybe school counseling programs or something like that.
Would it be maybe helpful, and I'm just kind of spitballing here, but would it be helpful to put something up here in this introductory paragraph that says something like the task force has worked on some of these programs below, and we'll work on others in our upcoming work, or something like that, to make it clear that this list, we worked on some of it, we're working on these issues in general, we'll look at these programs in the future, something like that, to just make that a little clearer. I don't know if that would be helpful.
And the one thing about the school district thing, we just Tuesday night passed a contract for work in some of the school districts with some of the reserves that have built up in the behavioral health fund. So we did put that to use out in that prevention world in the schools. So I think there was a number of school districts, and Bellingham actually was not one of them, if I remember right. Raylene?
Thank you. So under Intercept 3, I agree with Stephen on the increased warrant quash. I mean, we had the one amnesty or warrant quash that was county-wide right before Eric Ritchie was elected. And, you know, it's a good thought, but we haven't continued that. And most of the courts in Whatcom County now, they offer, if somebody calls and says they want to quash a warrant, we do it. It's not like a waiting process. It's the next court date, or if you come in, we're going to pull the warrant. We're going to try to help you. So I kind of concur on that. But something that I didn't see in here were two things, and that was the domestic MRT violence MRT program that Bruce and Jake have been working with to alleviate some of the costs for those that are required to do mental health treatment. That's in-house, and that's something that we've done that I don't see on here. The other thing is the new family court that Angela Anderson has kind of been rolling with, that seems to be beneficial, and those are things that I think are helping the people that I don't see, that maybe we should probably have some type of excerpt on.
Thank you, Raylene. I will have them include, I did at one point suggest the specialty course. I'm not seeing it on here, but I can have them include family court for sure.
Okay.
And the DVMRT program as well.
Perry?
Yeah, just a couple of things in that topic that Raylene was just touching base on, Jill, just FYI, it's referred to as DV POTS, POTS, the Domestic Violence Perpetrator Outpatient Treatment Services. Jake Wybush, really good contact for any information that you want on that. Combined funding from the Behavioral Health Program Fund as well as City of Bellingham for individuals accessing domestic violence treatment. So it isn't, I think that there's an MRT component to it, but MRT is actually something a little bit different. So sorry about, all that detail, but I just thought I would offer that. Also, just FYI, with Stephen's mention of Watcom Clubhouse is actually the terminology, and they actually have an open house this afternoon. It's located on 1331 Meadow Avenue, and they are open, and there are a number of members that have joined at this point. And John Kraus has done a couple of presentations we have a bi-monthly behavioral health crisis services meeting that includes all the providers and so forth out there. So just wanted to offer that up. and finally, it is an interesting point that you mentioned, Jill, in terms of sort of the description and the thought certainly struck me as well, that many things that the task force has been involved in has sort of led to so many, different resources and services that are out there. And so, the specific, work and activity, I mean, oftentimes, obviously, the subcommittees, will talk about, make recommendations to a variety of programs that aren't, necessarily listed here. So I suppose that it's more in the introduction of what are we talking about, as opposed to, well, that was us, if you will, task force, as opposed to, other entities that oftentimes, of course, pick up those recommendations and suggestions and then further develop it. But so maybe some defining in the introduction or the opening paragraph would be helpful.
That's great. Thank you very, very much, Perry. That's really helpful. And I agree with you.
I thought the same thing, Perry. That's the place to do it. Dan?
Yeah, no, I'm just kind of riffing off of that. No, I think that we need to be vocal about our partnerships that we have with various groups and institutions. And a lot of us are on multiple different, boards, task forces, committees. And I think that needs to be somehow described. I'm not a marketing person, so I don't know how that would work necessarily. And then I guess, so fine point would be intercept 3. I can't, I'm on my phone here, so I can't really see it very well, but DWLS3 is not, I don't see it listed. Maybe it is. That I think that's a key thing that was an ACLU priority when we first started back in the day. And then the other one would be I don't see friendship diversion services on here for the ankle bracelets. I think that's a key. Like when we first started, that was one of the first things that we were able to get accomplished. And the county was resistant to that, but they then came along. I think there were some logistical things that were preventing that from happening in the county, but eventually they did. But I think that those two things should be included if they're not.
Thank you, Dan. I see in intercept 2, they have the second bullet point says subsidized district court electronic home monitoring. I'm thinking we should just remove the district court and make it subsidized court electronic home monitoring in lieu of detention, because that does include more than just court.
Yeah. Okay, I see it now. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I think that's important to retain the piece that it's, for those that can't afford it, it's still going to be available to them.
Raylene?
Thanks. So Perry, you're right. There is the DV POTS, and I appreciate you pointing that out, because I was thinking that you were exactly right, except there is DVMRT too. And I think that was through the anger management moral recognition therapy. So they did DVMRT and for intimate partner violence, and DV POTS was also part of it. So I think both of them are definitely things that should be pointed out, not just the one.
Stephen?
I want to endorse the comments about the introduction and how that can frame things. because I do think one of the things that the task force has really done, and its wider effect, is that it's catalyzed the work of the task force has catalyzed a lot of work elsewhere in the community. So if we frame the effect that we've had on community services as a whole, I think we can bring in some of these things that we're listing here that aren't necessarily our doing to our credit, but that we have, our work has promoted. I think on Intercept 2, I would also note that we created a Superior Court pretrial services unit that is sort of how we can deal with pretrial releases. That was the first thing of the work group, was we needed a pretrial services unit that would have hands-on some of those people, and I think that's sort of a noteworthy creation that we're reshaping a bit now, but is valuable to have up there.
Thank you, Stephen. I will make sure that's added as well. And then just the last couple slides on here are Intercept 5, and then the link to the sim itself. So I will send this around. Know that it's going to change dramatically, and when I get an updated version back from Pyramid, I'll send it around to y'all again, just so you can see what changes were made from the discussion today. Stephen, did you have something else that you?
No, just a slow lower hand.
Oh, okay.
Dan.
Hey, I don't know who's in charge of respondwhatcom.org, but every time I try to go there, it does not load and says like the server's not responding or something. Do we have any handle on that at all?
I think that's through Health Department. Perry, do you guys, is that contract with them still active?
It is, sorry. Yes, I can, I haven't been on it for a little while, Dan, but I will reach out to Joe Fuller in that regard, because I know that he and some others are involved in that.
Yeah, that's got to get fixed. I mean, this is like, you know, we always talk about communication and like how we always need to be better at this. This is like one of our like most basic ways that we can communicate out to the public when it comes to lead, Grace, ART, co-responder, all the thing. I'm loading it right now. It's not loading, and it's just stuck. So if we can, that needs to get fixed. I don't know. Yeah, if you can reach out to them, it'd be great.
Glad to.
Okay, thank you.
So anything else?
Yeah, there's just a few more things I wanted to let you all know. That Pyramid is going to be, as I mentioned, working on some content that we can put out to the community in terms of recruiting new membership in January. We're also scheduling some staff training for Jenna and I to move forward, and also the November IPRTF meeting will solely be focused on Pyramid will attend, and they'll do some training to the full task force as well, in terms of continuing on with our communications effort. And then they're done at the end of December. So, Mike.
Really quick, I want to make sure that I heard correctly. You said the full January meeting is devoted to Pyramid?
November, yes.
Full
So they
November.
asked for an hour and a half for training, and the whole meeting is an hour and a half, so they're not going to get that. But yeah, majority of the November meeting will be Pyramid training to the full IPRTF.
Okay.
So you have everything you need, Jill, do you feel? And
Yeah,
when's that first post gonna drop?
I
know it was on the sheet, but
it's scheduled to drop on October 24th. We'll still need to get final language and run it past legal as well.
Anything else on Pyramid? All right, what else we got, Joe?
So the last thing, and I'm gonna screen share here right quick, are the agenda items for the full task force meeting for the rest of the year. So for October, we're making arrangements for the Denver SIB and Pay for Success model. Jenna has been working on that. She's not with us today, but she's been working on getting speakers lined up for that. As I mentioned, pyramid communications training for November. And both Maya and Raylene have suggested some full task force agenda items as well. Maya, you wanted to talk about your workload study?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of discussion right now about the newly published workload standards for public defense, and I think people should know about it. What's the date in December?
Let me check 1 moment. December 18th. And then the joint meeting is December 19th, the Joint Legal and Justice and Behavioral Health Committee, which technically is a special full task force meeting.
Okay, thank you. So I mean, I'd be happy to do just, you know, an explanation of what those standards are and what the impact may be.
Mike?
Thanks, Barry. I've recently had a really excellent conversation with Mike Hilly talking about the 23-hour center and some of the hopes and dreams. And, you know, we're in that kind of startup phase. And I know that there's a lot of decisions haven't been made yet. Similar to what we did at the Ann Deacon Center for Hope, where the task force was able to kind of learn about it, but also then refine some recommendations after hearing different speakers and from different stakeholders. I think we can be a more useful sounding board for the exec's office and for the county as they lift this 23-hour center up. And I don't see that in the agenda in the coming end of the year. And this is pretty crucial. And from what I hear from law enforcement and EMS, there's a lot of thoughts and input, and the task force could be a good host for that, both to educate us on what is currently going on and what the plans are, and what are the spaces for input. And I hate to suggest starting a new committee because that's always kind of a death knell, but I just want to bring up that, you know, we used that strategy, and Perry, thank you for chairing that, kind of chaired that and kind of shepherded some of the task force, you know, desires and recommendations for that startup. And in preparation for that, and if we decide to do that, I think getting that 23-hour center and at least kind of an update and invite some key stakeholders to participate in that update, I think would be really valuable. So again, just to reiterate, getting that 23-hour center, and if I'm reading it correctly, the only spot on the agenda might be in November. Or is it October, Joe? One of the two, whatever Pyramid is not doing, or December, whichever of those three where there's space. I think it would be great to do that for the end of the year. That's my suggestion.
Yeah, we can make space, I think, in the October or December meetings.
Stephen?
First, I want to endorse Maya's suggestion that we talk at a task force level about the public defender situation. I also think there's been some pretty extensive discussion, credit to Perry, in committee about admissions protocols and the practicalities of getting into the Ann Deacon Center. I'd like to suggest that because we're all over the map on that, different people are coming at that from different directions, and there are different pieces to resolving that. I'm suggesting, I think that very soon, if not the December meeting, ought to be elevated to the task force where everybody can have some input there, and maybe we can make some deliberative kinds of recommendations for which roads to go down and which to postpone, perhaps. I don't know. It also seems to me, apropos of Mike's comment, that the 23-hour center intersects completely with the problems we're having at the Ann Deacon Center. And we ought to be talking about those together. I would recommend. And lastly, I think I mentioned this to Jill, maybe to Barry, I don't know. And I'm thinking of December as well, and we're starting to pack that one pretty tightly as well. But there's been a state task force started by the legislature that Wendy and Caleb have been on to create some jail oversight and jail standards statewide, uniform across jurisdictions. They're about to come out with a final report. Apparently that's going to be pretty controversial. And Wendy and Caleb have some concerns about it. I would like to see once that report is out, which I think could be later this month or early November, I'd like to see us having that report and having a discussion pro and con about what that means, especially since by that point we may be headed toward a new jail or headed toward some sort of ugly triage with the existing facility. And those standards and the legal impacts of those are going to be pretty significant either way.
Jill?
Thank you, Stephen. Is that report that you're talking about, Raylene, is that the same report that you were going to bring up as an agenda item for one of these meetings? I'm wondering if it is, and I'm also thinking, you know, there's room on the October agenda, I believe. If Maya, if you would rather do your have your conversation sooner rather than later, I can totally get you guys on there in October as well, I think.
Would that be, let's see, November 13th?
October. So, well, so that's like what, in a couple weeks?
Is it-
October.
Sorry. October.
So today's the 12th, so October 23rd.
I'm out of the office that day.
Okay.
Can't-
Okay.
Did you want me to look at November or no?
It's up to the group.
Oh, I can do
Rather have-
December. It's fine. Whatever you guys want. I just can't do October.
Yeah, with that training in November, that might
That's fine. It can wait till
that
December.
be
Thank you.
unknown exactly how long that'll go.
That's
I
great.
had a question for Perry on the 23-hour crisis care center. Is that something that we should fold into your subcommittee of the crisis stabilization and have that be a piece of that? It seems so related that it would be good to have in that committee.
Rename it diversion facilities.
Yeah, something more that would encompass both facilities and future ones as well.
I think that would be fine. I am involved with the executive's office, just, you know, offering, you know, input and so forth in terms of program design and the related legislative language and, you know, and so forth. So I'd be more than happy to, you know, sort of add that component to it, just to support the process.
Just
So-
seems natural that it should, you know, go to that subcommittee.
Well, if my suggestions are taken, honestly, the avoidance of siloing these two programs and them being created with the idea and thought process that they're geographically both close together, as well as in systems, even documentation of intake, then they would also belong in that committee. Not necessarily that Perry will get his way, but you know, those are some of the suggestions that I've been making already, and we're very early on in the development, but I'd be more than happy to take that on.
That'd be great. Getting on board early would, in my opinion, would be important.
Yeah, agreed.
Jill?
Thanks. I just wanted to circle back to Raylene and the BJA task force and if putting that on the agenda.
Okay, so thanks, Jill. I think we need to touch base with Caleb and Wendy and just see if this is the similar report. So this was presented to the Bureau of Justice Alternatives to Incarceration, and Tank and I are both members of that committee. They did a jail use in Washington 2005 to 2019 presentation at that last task force. That is recorded, so I can get a copy of that from Pam Englert and send that around if anybody's interested in reviewing that, and I can double check with Caleb and Wendy and see if it's the same presentation. There were definitely some concerns that came out of that presentation, some questions that I asked. It was a great presentation. There was a lot of information, and it was important to look at the racial and ethnic disparity. And, you know, Whatcom County seemed to be doing pretty good, but the questions that I raised is the time frame that they had this was the same time that Whatcom County was transporting people on a regular basis to Yakima. And so that information wasn't counted. So Yakima had different groups than what Whatcom County did, and they didn't have that data for the transports and where they came from. So you know, a lot of the jails in the different areas are transporting people. I mean, Bellingham's using SCORE currently for some of their individuals. And so when we're looking at all of this data, we got to remember that some of it's skewed because that information isn't there. Also, the Hispanic population wasn't counted in the ethnicity properly because of the requirements by the FBI and fingerprinting. And so all of that information that was provided was great, but we got to take everything with a grain of salt because they missed some of those parts. And I think Tank and I might be able to present more on some of that stuff in the future, but it's definitely information. A lot of it with the pretrial services group kind of overlaps that I think they might be interested in participating in that group in the future, because I am going to actually have to step down from that committee because I was appointed by the District Municipal Court Management Association. So that's a lot of information. Sorry. And the other thing that I brought that my husband actually provided to me is the crisis intervention team training. That's a requirement mandated by law enforcement. So it'd be really nice for somebody to kind of highlight that in the future. Maya's information, I think, is imperative to moving forward because we already discussed some of the public defense problems, and that's going to help, I think, process the court cases along further if we can increase the public defense needs. So I've just combined everything all in once. Is there anything else, Jill, that I'm missing?
That's everything that I needed from everyone today. Thank you all so much.
Thanks. Stephen?
I'm sorry.
Stephen,
Barry?
go ahead. Sorry, I was muted.
Thank you. I encourage you, Raylene, to check with Wendy and Caleb. I think we're talking about two different things. Yours is a study and a retrospective, and theirs is a prospective, probably imposing some uniform standards on jails. And as I listen to this, I haven't heard anything that's not critically important information for the task force. It makes me wonder, you know, we're gonna have a bunch of incoming members, new members, and to the extent that a lot of this is sort of future facing background for some of the work that'll happen in 2024. I wonder if some of this maybe should be pushed into January and February when the new members can build a knowledge base with this recent these recent groups and reports and so forth. Just a thought.
Yeah. Anything else on upcoming task force meetings? Okay, Jill, what do we have left? Public comment?
Other business and public comment.
Barry, could I interject one other thing?
Sure.
We separated out membership recruitment and succession planning, and then we didn't even talk about succession planning. I don't know where that stands, who's thinking about that and working on that. whether that comes after we compile a full membership.
Jill?
There was a comment made in the past about there not being any kind of a process for selecting the next co-chairs. I just want to say that there is a process and it's in the bylaws. And ultimately, it's going to be a vote of the full task force. So in terms of approaching someone to find out if they're interested in taking on that work, that's great. But I just want to make sure everyone is aware that there is a voting process at the task force for officially designating the new co-chairs.
Okay. Anything more on that leadership aspect of our recruitment and fulfilling our, Stephen?
I raised that because I thought there needed to be some background work there, unless you want to have the House GOP speaker issue going on in the task force.
No, thank you.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful if we know who's interested and we can encourage particularly qualified people.
Anything else? Any other business? Okay, let's do public comment.
Thank you. We do have one attendee with us today. If you'd like to speak to the steering committee, please virtually raise your hand now. And no hands are raised. And I can't tell if we have anyone in our conference room or not. Doesn't seem so.
No, all I see is a bookshelf and a
Yeah.
window. So,
So I'm sorry to circle back and we just did the public comment part, but I want to just go back to Stephen's thoughts because do we have a short list, and is it this committee's job to make sure this happens, or is there some other body that's gonna work on this?
I think that's a great question, Maya. Like Jill said, the process itself will take place within the task force. But and also taking up Stephen's point is we don't want a chaotic process.
So there was some talk earlier about people that might be candidates. I think Raylene offered some. I know that I reached out to, I just am thinking like, who has time to do this work?
Yeah.
I reached out to Peter Fraser to say, is this something you could be interested in doing? And Stephen chimed in on that too. I just, yeah, like, do we have, I feel a little adrift on that subject. So Peter agreed, wants to join the task force because he's not even a member, right?
Right.
And that can happen. Jill, you emailed him about the timing for that, right?
I can't believe it. Or I can't remember if I have reached out to him or not, but I have it on my list to do for
Okay,
sure.
great. Do we need to like select, because the person has to be a member of the task force in order to be vice or chair? Do we want to like ask Jill to send an email out soliciting our members or asking them to nominate people who may not be on the task force? Like, do we want to try to do like a little bit of a search effort?
I think it's appropriate if you individually have people in mind who you think would be great candidates. You're perfectly welcome to invite them to apply and to do your own recruiting, each of you individually. As far as this steering committee or the full task force itself recruiting specific individuals, that makes me a little uncomfortable. I'd want to check with legal counsel about that.
Okay.
But yeah, you all as on your own can definitely recruit folks if you have someone in mind and invite them to apply.
Stephen.
Yeah, I guess let us know what they say. Go ahead, Stephen.
I was just gonna say, I agree with Jill that we all ought to individually recruit people, because that's just encouraging people to send in an application. I do think maybe the steering committee is probably the only place that could try to think through the pretty complicated role of co-chair and target some people, and I don't think that's inappropriate for the steering committee to do. And I'll go back to Maya's point. I do think Peter could do that. I think there are arguments why that might not be the ideal, but it may be the best we can come up with. I'm going to encourage somebody to think about considering co-chairing also. But there aren't, as Maya pointed out, it's a time-consuming responsibility, and so there aren't a lot of people probably who even realistically could consider that.
I mean, Stephen, I have no idea how much time you devote to the task force. A lot.
A lot. I would say a lot.
Can you quantify that in like a job description or like a paragraph that you could send to the steering committee? Like, this is the amount of time I'm devoting per month. I mean, I just want to be realistic with whoever we're asking to make this commitment.
Yeah, I can do that. I think I did a draft to
Okay.
a couple of people. It does vary, like this last year and a half with the SAC and a lot of the needs assessment stuff was particularly heavy because you had sort of dual responsibilities.
Yeah.
And Jack does a little less than I do. I sort of took the Jill Bernstein model of going to all the committee meetings because I felt like somebody needed to have that overview. But doesn't have to be that way. We could have a less involved co-chair.
Jill, can you facilitate the rest of the meeting? I do have to go. I have to grab something to eat before my next meeting. So
Sure,
Barry.
of course. Thank you, Barry.
okay, thanks all. See you later.
Anyway, I'll do that, Maya. I think that would be helpful.
Thanks.
Thanks, Stephen. I just want to caution everyone to be a little bit careful about the language that we're using specifically in terms of what the steering committee can and can't do. It is the steering committee is empowered to do very few things outside of making recommendations to the full task force. So I don't know that a steering committee can make an official recommendation about in terms of any kind of recruiting thing on behalf of the steering committee as a body without endorsement from the task force. So I just want to caution on the language that you're using there.
Thank you.
I'm sorry if I overstepped the lines, Jill. That's exactly what I was thinking, was making a recommendation.
Thanks. Arlene?
I'd like to recommend David Goldman to be a member of the IPRTF. He represents behavioral medicine and the jail, because he did some teaching people to read in the jail. And he did a survey for us of the jail members. We need to have representation of the jail on the IPRTF.
Thank you, Arlene. That gives me a good idea. I think what I'll do is put together just a general email to send to all of you that is specific to the vacancies that are coming up and how people can apply. So if you do know someone who might be interested in applying, you can forward that email to them. It'll have all the relevant dates and information and links to applications, etc. Is there any other business? Okay, and we've had our public comments. I think that's an adjourn. Thank you, everyone.